To those joining us for the first time remotely or here in Emerson Hall on the Cornell campus, I'm Terry Tucker, a faculty member in the Department of Global Development and one of the organizers of this long-standing seminar series. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Tim Hart. Tim leads entrepreneurship and accelerator programs at Oxentia, a consultancy that supports innovation ecosystem development across the world. Based in Oxford, UK, Oxentia developed out of the University of Oxford's Technology Transfer Office. Tim has worked as an academic researcher himself, a university technology transfer professional, and an entrepreneur, having spun out and managed 2 life science companies from university research and advised in the formation and growth of many others. Tim is also a founder and director of the Oxentia Foundation, an arm of Oxentia that works to address some of the challenges innovators and entrepreneurs face in low and middle income countries. He has sought to bring attention to and address the inequities in resource access faced by developing country innovators and entrepreneurs. He joins us today to share some observations emerging from Oxentia's efforts to support innovation in emerging economies. The title of today's talk is Tackling Global Inequalities in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Thank you for joining us today, Tim. Over to you.
Okay, Terry, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Hello, good afternoon, I guess, just about. And hello to everybody online too. And thank you for inviting me to give this talk. Right. I'm going to talk to you today, really what is some observations of mine since I've started this interest, if you like, in entrepreneurship. So the idea of what I'm going to go through with you is I'll make some introductions. Thank you, Terry, for making the introduction. That makes my life a bit simpler. So we'll cut to the chase. And then we're going to look at what have been some local and global observations that we've made in how we've been supporting innovators and entrepreneurs. We do it because we're trying to support economic development. We do it across the world, and then try to close with some key takeaways and issues that are on our minds at the moment in this area. So you've heard a bit of background about me. I'm gathering some significant experience in this space, but the interesting thing is I started off my life as wanting to become a plant pathologist. My first degree was in botany with microbiology, and I spent the next 7 years doing a PhD and then postdocing in effectively soil science, and that's how I wanted to spend my life. Maybe I got myself in, I don't think I was a very good scientist, to be quite honest with you, I discovered the dark side, entrepreneurship, and I wandered off and set up a spin-out company, just having finished a postdoc, and then did another one, and then came to what is now Oxentia to do more. And they managed to absorb me, and now I help people across the world doing it. So it's a pleasure to be in the company of other agricultural researchers and scientists, and back to certainly where I started, and hopefully where I'll get back to. Okay, so a little bit about this organization called Oxentia. There's about 25 of us in Oxford. We're an important part of the Oxford innovation ecosystem, and we go right back to 1988 when the University of Oxford decided that it would start technology transfer activities, and that became known as ISIS Innovation. We became known at the time as ISIS Enterprise, and we developed because Oxford developed a track record, just like most universities did who started early, in technology transfer practice, supporting the academics with their innovation and taking it into the real world. And at the time, a great focus on making money. And so what happened was other people started coming to the tech transfer office at Oxford. And more and more people came. And we helped them, and then more and more people came. So we thought, well, we have to set up some separate enterprise to support people outside of Oxford, helping them develop capability in technology transfer. And so that's what became known as ISIS Enterprise. Now, ISIS Enterprise, for reasons that you can well guess, changed its name to what is now Oxentia. And we became too big to be part of the technology transfer office. So only a few years ago, we span out and that was a management buyout, and we're now a separate organization, but very closely connected. ISIS Innovation, which was the technology transfer office at Oxford University, became known as Oxford University Innovation, changing its name for obvious reasons. ISIS has nothing to do, in our sense, with international terrorism. It had all to do with the part of the river that runs through Oxford, the River Thames, that runs through Oxford, which is called the Isis. So that's the story behind it. But we had to change our name. Right, so that's a bit of background on Oxentia. And we focus on supporting the public and the private sector, huge focus on supporting delivering impact out of publicly funded research. And we've worked all over the world for the last 18 years now. We've operated in over 70 different countries, and we've gained some insights and we've realized some things. A bit more about what we do as consulting, strategic consulting. Sometimes governments ask us how they should better use innovation to deliver economic development and drive their economy. We don't just strategically consult. We come from a technology transfer background, so we're practitioners and we roll up our sleeves and we implement programs with our clients. We train and mentor a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, as well as try and upskill technology transfer within academic institutions. And we wouldn't be doing anything to do with innovation and entrepreneurship if we didn't do any accelerators. So we design and we deliver accelerators all over the world, again, with a real focus on trying to make sure we're getting impact out of publicly funded research. That's a bit about what we do. So I'd like to start with just a glimpse into the Oxford innovation ecosystem, because that's really where we start. And so that's where we see things from a perspective. And just a snapshot for last year's figures, if you like, metrics for the university's technology transfer office, generating revenue. You can see there returning as much as we can back to the university from all the commercialization activities. So 19 million in revenue from all the licensing and any other spin-out based revenue generating activities. Quite a lot of IP deals were done in that 12-month period. About 300 disclosures. You get about 300-400 disclosures of inventions out of the university. There's a big legacy of IP, as you can well imagine, as I'm sure is the case in most universities. So about 4,500 patents under management by that tech transfer office, managed by about 70 people, I would think. So they're all overworked. There's not enough time. But we produce a lot of companies. For the UK, Oxford produces a lot of companies every year. And I'll tell you why that figure is relatively high. But increasingly, the university produces social enterprises and not just classic university deep technology spin-out companies. Last year was, for us in Oxford, a record in the amount of investment that we got into spin-outs, and that was just over £1 billion, despite, of course, the pandemic. Oxford doesn't just comprise of the university. Those of you who have visited may know that there's lots of other stuff going on. It's a very rapidly growing innovation ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of critical mass, just like a lot of leading research research-based ecosystems are, but not without its own challenges. And I would say that one of the worries that we have, one of the sensitivities that we have in Oxford, we often compare ourselves to other ecosystems like Cambridge, is that we can't seem to retain the businesses. Once we generated these great spin-out companies, they reach a point where, guess what, a lot of them end up where you guys are, over in the US. And so we're very keen on working out ways in which we can retain them. Cambridge has done a better job. That could be coincidence, that could just be the way things happen. It could be something to do with their community. But several years ago now, a view was taken by some friendly investors to Oxford that said, well, if we want to grow and retain billion-dollar companies, we better fund them. And so what happened was at the time, it became the largest technology investment fund in the world focused on one university. And so this is an $800 million fund just to be deployed into supporting the development of Oxford University technology businesses. And that has been one of the key reasons why we've seen an increase in the number of spin-outs, because we've got resource and capital to deploy to create them. Again, we often compare ourselves to Cambridge. Cambridge has something called the Cambridge phenomenon. And they've defined this as being their secret formula for how they've made their ecosystem so successful. And a lot of that is based on communities, people working together. So we thought we better have something. So we had something called the Oxford Boom. And this is something that we came up with a few years ago. And it really represents that combination of a big capital fund, that $800 million fund, Oxford Sciences Enterprises, along with some other things that we've been very privileged to have. The university, as far as the Times Higher Education rankings go, has been lucky enough to be the best university in the world, top of those rankings since 2016, and continues to be fortunate enough to retain that position. And there's lots of growth and investment going on here with science parks and innovation districts, and great growth for the future, as well as what happens with a lot of research-intensive ecosystems, that great intersect between disciplines, between the life sciences, for example, and the physical sciences, and the resulting explosions in new interdisciplinary research and innovation going on there. Okay, so widening it out, just a couple of interesting facts about our regional economy. It employs a lot of people in the high-tech sector. And interestingly, it's actually only one of 3 regions in the UK which produces a net contribution back to UK government in terms of tax receipts. So yes, high knowledge-based economies do deliver and are very productive. So we've been able to demonstrate that here in this region. About maybe even 15 years ago, when we first started trying to support other ecosystems across the world, and they were mainly in emerging economies, we came up with something called the Oxford model. And we thought the way forward was actually all we needed to do was to go out and tell people how we did it. And it was totally wrong, and it was totally naive, but we did it. And I managed to find the oldest slide I could find, which I think is probably back in about 2008. And this is what we told people that was the secret of success of generating knowledge-based economies, making sure you're getting value out of your universities. And it was all based on IP. Now, one of the most successful spin-out companies we've had out of the University of Oxford at the point of sale had no patents. So what does that tell us about the value of IP in commercializing research out of universities? So we've learned a lot along the way. And we thought the secret was policies. Once everybody understands this process and what you do with research and who does what and who's allowed to do what, that was the secret. The reality is that the reason that innovation ecosystems, such as Oxford and all the other ones around the world, including you guys, what you have, is that in the case of Oxford, what you need, if you want to generate something like Oxford, everybody's trying to replicate the Silicon Valley. Well, for Oxford, you need over 900-year-old university. You've got to put about 6,000 world-leading researchers in it, give them about $1 billion every year to spend on research. Then they'll come out with some smart ideas, and you need decades of sustained public and private sector support and financing. That's how you do it. Now, believe me, I've been on the other side of the table. That's not helpful and doesn't fall well with an emerging economy. That doesn't really help them. So we have to come up with something different. Now, technology transfer out of Oxford has a reputation. It's been a significant part of our ecosystem. It is an important component. And the reason I put this up is because we've written a book about it. I haven't read it all, but I know the man behind it. Tom Hockaday was CEO of the university's technology transfer office for a good 10 years, an important 10 years in our growth and evolution. And Tom's written a book on how to do university tech transfer. So if you're interested, I'm not promoting it, by the way. I know Tom well, but it's a significant output as to defining perhaps what's been important for us in enabling this ecosystem to grow. The reason I'm telling you this, the punchline's coming, is because it's different in the rest of the world, other parts of the world. The point is, what do we learn from the Oxford model? What do we learn from where we're sitting right now? What do we learn? That it's atypical. And it's quite difficult to help people with what we know here. In periods of time where the people with the budget in government don't have 900 years to make a change. They don't even have 10. In fact, some of them don't even have 2. Let's ask it a different way, and I'm not going to expect you to answer this, but just have a think. Why is it important to support innovation from the public sector? You know, universities occupy a very sacred position in society. It's the only place where we have freedom of academic thought. It's a very, very important institution, very precious to society. Why are we getting so wound up about innovation? Let's look at it another way. Why do we do research? As a society, why do we do research? Now, we could argue about this, but we're not going to. I'm going to give you an answer. Let's just hopefully we can live with this. To advance knowledge for the future benefit of humankind and our environment. Perhaps that's why we do research. That fits with a university's remit, freedom of academic thought. What is innovation? Well, we could spend another hour arguing about that. But if we were happy with this definition, application of knowledge, create new products and services. So we know why we do it and we know what is innovation. So my next question is this. Whose job is it to innovate from research? I'm a researcher. I do basic research. I produce outputs. It's not my job. There are others out there. There's society, there's industry, there's the private sector. Could be the others. We like to look at it a different way. You guys may have come to this conclusion before, I'm sure. In academic research, if we think about it more from the private sector perspective, who's the customer? what do they get for their money? Well, who is the customer? Well, we get paid to do research. We get paid by government. Where does government get its money from? From the taxpayer. So we're using the people's money, right? What do they get back for their money? Well, they get publications. They get lots of papers. They get lots of knowledge. They get the ability for academics to apply for more taxpayers' money, to do more public funded research. The message is perhaps that if we're using the people's money, we best make sure that they get something back for it. And perhaps we could all do a lot more in that space, and I know that we are doing a lot more in that space. Going back to Oxford, the Oxford model, what we were doing, how we were communicating and trying to support people in different parts of the world with our innovation management consulting work. I cut to slightly later, cut to 2013, and I checked out what companies were in my portfolio, what countries and projects I've been working on in just that 1 year. It was quite an eclectic mix. You can see there the diversity of different countries and experiences that just I had within the business as one of 25 people. We were doing work in South Korea, in Saudi, in Iceland, in Japan, in Latin America, in France, even. In a tiny island called Malta, we were working. And I go back even further with something that started to really resonate with me and started to drive my interests and purpose into how we really need to support entrepreneurs and innovators. And it's a very timely story, perhaps. This is a story of two researchers in Kiev in the Ukraine. And it goes back to 2008, where I was asked to go on an assignment to try to deliver some training, commercialization training to former Soviet Union scientists whose budgets had changed. They were less driven by research into military applications, and they had to go and find other sources of funding and had to apply their research portfolio and background not towards military applications, but to doing other things. And it was fascinating. And I met a group of scientists, and they were great fun. They had one thing in common, right? And it didn't matter what they were doing. One of them was doing wind turbines. One of them was doing, they'd made these huge lenses. Didn't matter what they were doing, very diverse products and innovations. Whenever you asked them, how'd you come up with that idea, there was always a military story behind it. And I met these guys, Vladimir Soshnitsky and Ilya Tchaikovsky. You know, this is for a tech transfer professional, you meet academics with a great idea. And I met these two guys, and they told me that their innovation was a new cardiac imaging device. And would I like to look at it, and could I help them at all? And you know, you go, all right, well, tell me, have you got any papers published on it or any information? Have you got a prototype? And they said, well, we've got it in a hospital down the road. We use it every day. Do you want to have your heart tested? Wow. That's not what we normally get from academics on disclosure. What, you've developed this thing and it works and you're using it? Yeah, we use it all the time, but we can't get it commercialized. Wow. So I looked at this in a little bit more detail, and there's a picture of me. Vladimir was showing me. I'm a life scientist, so this was some deep tech physical science. So it took me a while to get my head around it. This was effectively a screening tool that enables much more accurate, efficient detection of some difficult to diagnose cardiac ischemia and arrhythmias. And they were using it in the hospital. They got countless case studies of how this has frankly saved people's lives. It's all based on something called magnetocardiography, for those of you who are interested. And they developed it into this quite simple device that you could operate, in fact, could be made mobile. And there's me actually there having my heart tested. Fortunately, I was younger then, so it was all right. And so, yeah, it works. And I got very interested and wanted to support them with this because they were stuck. These were guys that were absolutely at the cutting edge of this particular deep technology research area in the world. In fact, they were founded this technique of MCG, and they were stuck, couldn't get any capital. You know, the thing was in use. I took it back to the UK. We spoke to our National Health Service. We got some money in, and effectively we span out a business. And this became called Cardiomox. It's based in Oxford. It's also got a centre in China. It had Chinese investment put into it at the time, and it is now focused very much in Oxford, developing in clinical development to try and get this system used. Made me realise that, you know, the great innovators in the world and the great deep techs, they're not all in the great research centres, and that possibly over half the world's population live in immature innovation ecosystems, and there are great ideas that are stuck. And that drove me to want to help unstick them. I move on to work that we've been involved in a lot. The UK government, as part of its Overseas Development Aid programme, has a focus on international innovation. It developed something called the Newton Fund. It was a £725 million fund, and it was there to develop research and innovation partnerships for socioeconomic development. There was an element of science diplomacy and soft power within this programme, but basically with the emerging economies. So these were select emerging economies, those that we thought will become our future trading partners from the UK. So Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America. And we've been delivering some capacity building programs on this. And in fact, there's over 1,200 researchers that have been through this program we run with the Royal Academy of Engineering. It's called the Leaders in Innovation Fellowship Program. And the impact this program's had, we've trained and we've mentored these innovators, mainly from academic institutions, and we've supported them to develop their innovations and to make connections for them. And that's helped them access over $80 million of funding. It's created over 1,700 jobs, and it's delivered some great impact. And we've learned stuff about other innovators that are stuck, that aren't as lucky and privileged as the innovators that we find in places like Cornell and in places like Oxford. Yet they've all got the same size brains, but we're missing and we're losing and we're wasting opportunities to impact the world, not just in their own regions, but globally. And here's just one example. Here's a guy I met in Kenya. His name's Richard. And what Richard does is he takes a weed, right, on Lake Victoria called water hyacinth, and he takes it, and out of it, he produces bioethanol for cooking. So it's a cleaner fuel for cooking. And I met Richard because he came on a 3-day program. Like those of you, I'm sure there are people in the audience that have done this. You know, we're lucky enough to be able to visit these countries, and we go in and we're all very tired and we complain a lot. And, but we are looked after and we're taken and we're fed and we're watered. And I was here to support Richard and a few other people. And Richard looked tired. Richard had got to me in Nairobi on an overnight bus. So he'd been traveling overnight, didn't have much sleep. He's running this little company and he's frustrated. Richard's frustrated because he's produced this innovation, he's produced the product, it works, He's got loads of orders, big orders. All he needs is $50,000, $100,000, and he can buy the equipment to scale up his manufacturing. But he can't get the money. He can't get the capital. Richard, by the way, he does that in his spare time. Richard's a full-time school teacher. How many innovators like that do we get in places like Oxford, who are prepared to travel overnight on a bus to listen to people like me for 2 or 3 days? And they've already got a day job. It's people like Richard that I think we need to support and help unstick. So having been through this sort of capacity building experience and met all these innovators and spent some time trying to understand where ecosystems were stuck, particularly in Latin America, I thought the support they needed was here. I thought these guys, right, they're just like us. They're scientists. They need to understand what a business model canvasses. They need to understand how to do a cash flow forecast. They need to know about IP, right? Don't tell anyone your secrets, and make sure you file your patents. And they need leadership skills. They need to understand purpose-driven businesses and how to support teams and how to lead. And they need to understand how to communicate effectively. I thought that's all they needed, because that's what we've been doing. They do need that. But they also need support here. The inequity of capital. Because it's not just about having a great investable proposition. It might also be down to who you are and where you're based. In 2015, 75% of the world's startup capital went to 4 US states. That can't be right. So this is a real interest of mine. It's not just a problem in the US, of course. It's not just a problem in the UK. We have a problem in the UK. 75% of our capital goes to the south of the UK. What's happening in the north? We have a department, a government department in the UK now called the Levelling Up Department, where we're working hard to try and even out the distribution and make things less inequitable. But you can see down there, yes, there are stories out there. Yes, capital is going in more than it used to, impact investing into the emerging economies. But as you can see from that story, perhaps it's not all clear where it is going. And certainly from university perspectives, certainly from trying to make the most out of the innovation coming out of our institutions, the intellectual capital. So that's hard enough to support in places like Oxford. Very little support, very little capital available there. And for us, that's where they need the support. This is just another example of something on our journey that we've learned. We thought, well, how can we support these people? Well, if we run an accelerator program specifically targeting research coming out of academic settings, we know how to do that. We know what good looks like. We spent 30 years doing it in Oxford. Then can we bring investors in? And unlike a lot of international programs, our objective here is not to cherry pick, but to support a shift in the availability of private capital. All that capital that's centered around these great research centers of the world. Can't we shift some of it somewhere else? Wouldn't that have a great sustainable effect and more impact? There are some great examples of companies that we've supported on our accelerator program. And so we've started thinking about a fund. It's a crazy idea. There's one of our great early stage tech investors in Cambridge, a guy called Herman Hauser. And I said, Herman, this early stage tech investment stuff, this proof of concept stuff that you do so well in Cambridge, and we're learning about doing and how we do it in Oxford, and we've got some experience on it. We know how critical it is as we develop our university innovation ecosystems. He said, yeah. I said, how about we do one internationally? How about we do an early stage tech fund but we're not investing in stuff on our doorstep or in our own backyard. We haven't got airplane anguish, as a lot of investors have, but we're supporting innovations out there in the developing world. Herman's response was, well, that goes against conventional wisdom, doesn't it, Tim? I said, Herman, that's the point. So back in 2015, in an airport in Colombia, Bogota, we first started thinking about a feasibility plan, a study that we were asked to do for the Colombian government of a national proof of concept fund. We then went on and developed our own investment plan in around 2018 to deploy a sector agnostic plan. And in order to generate the pipeline, we thought, well, we'll put people through an accelerator program. We developed this program and we delivered it in person. It was focused on Colombia. We've also done it in Southeast Asia. And we transferred it all online because of the pandemic. It still works, as we found out a lot does if we have to move online. And more recently, we've started thinking about a sector-focused approach to this, and what we call an agri-tech venture lab. A fund which is a collaboration between a development bank, so a technical systems financing tool, and also the private sector. And that's something that we've been starting to look at more closely, and specifically, in fact, with one of your colleagues in Cornell. And that's something that we would like to explore further with you guys, and how was the catalyst to me talking to you here today. I'm not going to talk any more about the Agri-Tech Venture Lab. Perhaps we can leave that for another session. And I know time is ticking on, but the principle here is in ecosystem resource sharing. It's in working out what ecosystems don't have, and a lot of them that I've spoken about today don't have the capital. They don't have talent either, but they don't have the capital. And finding out how we can borrow bits from other ecosystems, right? And this can work at different scales. It can work in the UK. It can work regionally, it can work globally. So it's things like talent we could better resource share in across ecosystems. And market access, right? They can't get access to the markets they need to. How do we develop models to help them do that? Partners, they can't get the right partners where they are, and they are effectively stuck. And we need to develop better models to unstick them. And this relates really to adding perhaps another strand to the classic triple helix model. I'm imagining that none of you have heard of the Cory Quintuple Helix. This is a new model. You won't have heard of it because it's not published yet, because me and Alistair Cory thought about it on one afternoon in an Oxford office. Basically, we know what the triple helix model is. We know how we need to develop innovation ecosystems. We need the government sector, we need the public sector, we need the private sector, and we need universities. We know the fourth edition is we need people and society, and we start to see the interaction with the social side of how we develop innovation ecosystems, but we also need international networks and resources. We need them. We can't scale our businesses without the level of capital that you guys have over on the East Coast. We are fools to think that we can develop that for ourselves. So we need to try and work out a way where we can access resources that we don't have here in the UK to enable our innovations to scale. I mentioned, I think Terry mentioned at the beginning, that we do have a foundation, just to give you some insight into what we do in our foundation. And we work on behalf of our clients who share our vision and mission here. And it's all very much focused on trying to create a more equal world for innovators and entrepreneurs. And there is specific talk of the availability of capital in the mission that we have for our foundation. I'm not going to talk about Ben Brabyn, but I am going to refer you to another very interesting non-Oxford concept in how we can better connect and support business and society and have more impact and try to create a more equitable world for our business. I mentioned in my abstract that the rich get richer. Ben used to run the London FinTech incubator. It sits on the top of that tall tower in the city of London at 1 Canada Square. And he has enormous availability of capital through the community and the neighborhood that he lives in. And he's come up with a wonderful scheme. And I would like to see every university spin out, certainly in this country, subscribe to the scheme. And the scheme is called GenieShares. And the scheme is this, that every time you create a new university spin out, you give 1% to a targeted individual in an underrepresented group. You give 1% equity away in your business. Now, if you want to be inspired and you want to be moved by this concept or understand a little bit more about it, then just YouTube GenieShare and listen to the story of Peter Kelly, the founder of Employable, and a unemployed mother of 2 called Jade. And I hope perhaps you'll share my similar interest in how that kind of scheme and initiative could really help us to address some of the inequalities and better connect business and society. And I'm not going to tell you about the first university spin out, apart from the fact that I'll end with this story. It's a story that you're probably all familiar with, but obviously we were quite close to it. And I see it as a great turning point in how we are focusing on delivering impact and what drives us to deliver impact out of innovation that comes out of universities. And it's a turning point to commercialize the people, not profit. And we all know the story of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the conditions that the university put onto the corporate that they wanted to work with to commercialize that. But the interesting observation here is what Pascal Soriot responded with when he was asked, why did you, as a guy who is CEO of AZ, whose job it is, who doesn't get to go to sleep at night because all they're focused on is shareholder value, why do you agree to this non-profit deal? Response: my kids would kill me if I did not do this. What does that tell us about the changing world that we live in and what our priorities are for how we innovate and deliver impact? I'll give you some key takeaways. Those of you who like fish and chips, there's an additional takeaway I'll try and offer. We continue on our journey, and I hope you realize that what we do in Oxentia isn't just to deliver assignment after assignment in innovation management. We have a greater purpose. We want to ensure, it's a great focus of ours, because of where we've come from, that the intellectual assets out of publicly funded research are not wasted across the world. We support this continuing trend of putting people before profit in the innovation and impact that we are focused on delivering. And there are challenges around how we use innovation to drive international development. And when we think about it, it might not just be the skills that we need to help people with, but there might be something about the availability of resources for entrepreneurs. And it takes decades to redress this imbalance. And so we best start now with our endeavors. And I'll leave you with this. I'm sure you've heard it before, but it's a lot of the thinking behind the UK government's ODA programme, the Newton Fund. In terms of overseas development aid that we are so privileged to be able to deliver from the UK, and also I know you guys in the US deliver an awful lot too. Well, you can do it in various ways. You can give a man a fish and you can feed him for a day, or you can teach him how to fish and feed him for a lifetime. My additional point to add is someone's still got to give him the money to buy the angling gear. And I'll finish with that. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much, Tim. That was great. Questions and also online questions. Just put them in the chat box, and we'll call on you.
Yeah. You can't quite see me because I'm off the camera, but I am wondering if the kind of idea of having um not having, or I guess innovation existing or being possible and translatable into markets in only like mature innovation ecosystems can be translated as a concept, or if you've heard this been translated as a concept in academia and research, and the like fixed cost of essentially publishing your research and getting over that barrier versus just sharing it, like sharing your findings with your local institution, and not going through the process of trying to get to a journal, and all the time and money that that takes, and what your thoughts are on that, and if there's any efforts like the ones that you're doing in innovation ecosystems for more sharing of research.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thank you for the question. I guess I perhaps think about that as open source innovation, where we effectively deposit it and share it with the community instead of perhaps trying to publish it, or instead of which is a form of sharing, but one has to go through a process and there's value attached to that process, right? That perhaps we devalue it and we share knowledge more freely. And I personally believe that things start to change when you start to attach value to knowledge, and it actually fuels innovation and creativity within society and within ecosystems. So I think it's important that we don't just share everything, that we do think about ways that are equitable and fair, that we can share and distribute knowledge and benefit from it. But you've got to attach value to it because it starts to drive creativity. It's sometimes we say in environments like Oxford, and particularly in environments, and I'm sure it's exactly the same in Cornell, one tries to create a value where one tries to create an environment, a culture where ideas have value, and amazing things can happen when you do that. Okay.
Hi there. Was this on? Yeah. Okay, cool. So when you were talking about how kind of like a major issue in emerging markets is kind of the inequity of access to capital, and how so much of it comes down to who you know, what is Oxentia's strategy for making themselves more available to smaller scale innovators? Like, how are they able to find you?
Okay. Well, we just like a lot of ecosystems are developing into these programs, these accelerators are great ways to, if you can deliver programs, then that's the way to do it. We've worked hard over the last 18 years now to develop experience and networks into ecosystems. We don't know them all. Some ecosystems we know more than others. The ones where we do feel we have enough experience, we feel ready now to want to deliver programs that have capital attached to them. Yeah, effectively, Latin America is somewhere we work with a lot, and I think we're getting into a position where many people have heard me say we're getting more comfortable with the instruments that we've developed to be able to sign a check to a bunch of Colombians as innovators. So it's through experience and networks that we've developed that we felt more comfortable. Now, we could just be being naive, and please invite me back in 5-10 years time and I'll tell you how it goes. Thanks. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Hart. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I was wondering, since you stressed so much the importance of innovation as being able to pay back the taxpayer and go back into society, I guess through the government, but also it seems like social impact as well. And I was wondering how you measure and decide between which innovations to invest in. Like, how do you measure social impact against returns for investors? Like, how do you make those choices between which to invest in? How do you measure those social impacts?
What a great question. That's one of the great questions at the moment, isn't it? Is how on earth do we measure social impact? And I don't know that there are minds out there which are greater than mine who understand how to do this very well. I think Axion in the US has a lot of experience in this space. And so I don't have the definitive answer for you, but I do know that it's a challenge we're all trying to work out. There are frameworks that we have in the UK. There are lots of ways that people are trying to measure it. I don't know what the best one is, but they do exist. And I think we're all trying to work it out. I think one of the problems with impact is it's measured over such a long period of time, and we often don't have the patience. So we have to kind of take a judgment call. But there is no doubt in my mind, we recently convened a panel discussion among a bunch of investors that go right away from LPs through to fund managers. So we tried to get the whole value chain for investment. And because we were worried that impact wasn't something that further up the value chain in investment they cared about or understood. And the bottom line is they do. Everybody wants to see not just high-performing funds that are investing in technology, but impact. So it's here to stay. And we'll work out how to measure it, I guess.
Hey, how's it going? Just had a question. So just particularly in relation to the cannabis market in America and how the government, whether it be state or national, are almost pledging promises to do some sort of social equitable policies and other things in relation to the market and ensuring that the wealth from the industry is equitably distributed amongst different populations and that not all white males are prominently benefiting off the industry. How do you see like the approaches that y'all are taking in other emerging industries kind of like being used to affect and make sure those things go through in possibly America and other nations as the cannabis industry begins to evolve around the globe?
And which industry were you talking about in particular, sorry?
The cannabis industry.
The cannabis industry. And I'm not very familiar with that industry. But I can pass comment on the interest in the private sector that we see in supporting underrepresented groups. There is enormous, I'm sure it's the same in the US. At the moment, female entrepreneurs, why aren't we supporting more? Why can't we see more female entrepreneurs? Is a massive issue. And there's a lot of funds out there now that specifically target that. We get requests pretty much on a weekly basis for female entrepreneurship support. So certainly on the gender side, we're seeing a lot of interest, and that is also from the private sector. There is increasing pressure for the private sector to demonstrate that they're supporting society across the board.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Really appreciate it. We're out of time, and people just headed off to their next classes. And we appreciate very much your talk today. Thanks. And I have one question as well. What about following up on that first question that the student posed? There are lots of opportunities for universities and other institutions and individuals who are innovating or coming up with good ideas that do have that strong possibility for social impact, but are never going to attract an investor. We're in a college of agriculture here. Oftentimes we're thinking about that segment of agriculture in the global South that's really only semi-commercial, and yet some of the innovations that are emerging that don't have, great opportunity for return on investment can be really impactful. And they also need a lot of support and capacity building in terms of developing this innovation ecosystem to get those ideas from that, small, maybe it might be a farmers association or a community-based organization or a local business, this really small scale and local to take some of those ideas to scale. How do you see, what are the opportunities for supporting that innovation ecosystem development or strengthening that where profit and return on investment is not the main motivating factor?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, this is there are almost two different worlds, right? There's the world of deep tech, early stage technology investing, right? And that's the sort of classic VC world, and it's where everybody's hanging out in Boston and Silicon Valley and Cornell and Oxford and these places where there's a lot of research intensive activity. And this is deep tech, global opportunities, high risk, high return. And those communities historically are not interested in the opportunities that you're talking about and that we're thinking about as well. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the impact investing community. And these guys are out there looking at supporting simpler, what we would regard as simpler innovations out there in the community, sometimes just delivering it to lift people out of poverty, or that deliver a lot of social impact. And there's the bit in the middle, which is the bit that we're trying to look at, which is, but hang on a minute, what about the half deep tech innovations coming out of the universities that are not interesting enough for the VC community, but are too technology focused to be interested in the impact investing community? And so there's a gap that's not being addressed at the moment. It's not been addressed for a good reason, because it's blimmin' difficult. But that's the gap that we're trying to fill. So I think that we need to move more towards the impact investing community and drag them in more to the technology investing aspect.
Great, thanks so much.